Shalom uvracha, welcome, brochim habayim, to the first lecture of a series on a few lectures on the Haggadah shel Pesach. I would like to use this opportunity to present general insights to the Haggadah. We're not reading the text from the beginning of the Haggadah and going through the entire text. What I would like to show you, and it's based on my Hebrew on the website, which will be translated from Hebrew to English soon. It is a concept that I would like to show the different generations and the development of the Haggadah, the sources by their generations, and the chronological historical flow. The topics which I presented for this first lecture should be based on the overall structure of all the Jewish Chagim, the Jewish calendar, and I would like to, based on these insights, I would like to focus on a few structures in the Mishnah, namely Parshat Bikurim, which is the main part of the Haggadah, and afterwards a few words on the Hallel. You will find all this material on the Hebrew website. You can download from there a lot of material. There are handouts, all the presentations are there, and I tried to prepare handouts which summarize the ideas in a nutshell, and I hope that will help you to prepare the seder and to have hopefully new and interesting insights. Before we go right away to the topic of the Haggadah, I would like to say some general words on the structure of the Jewish calendars. Often we do not see the wood for the trees, so it's interesting to look on a very, very high level on the structure of all the Chagim. What I'm going to tell you in this graphic summary is based on the elaboration of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, one of the most famous rabbis of Orthodox rabbis in Germany in the 19th century. And he presented the structure of all the Chagim in an overview. And if we look at these Chagim, we will find some very, very interesting insights. And as I said, before we focus on the Haggadah and the meaning of the Haggadah, we can actually learn about the Haggadah a lot from the context, quite interesting insights. Pesach is the festival when we celebrate the Exodus from Egypt. We did not yet arrive to Eretz Yisrael, but we went out of Egypt. Shavuot is the festival when we bring the first fruits. After harvesting the first fruits, we bring them to the Mikdash. Now it's interesting that these two Chagim in the Bible are connected by the mitzvah of Sfirat HaOmer. We count 49 days, 7 weeks, in order to connect Pesach to Shavuot. The Torah, at the very, very first source in the Torah, says Pesach is not the end of the story, it's just the beginning. We left Egypt, true, great miracles, and we celebrate Pesach, true. But now we start counting for Shavuot because the final destination of this journey is not out of Egypt in the desert, it's from the desert to come to Eretz Yisrael. And the mitzvah Sfirat HaOmer strongly connects it. We start counting the second day of Pesach. Furthermore, we see, and that is a very interesting insight, it's kind of a darshanut, but it works beautifully, and might be there is a deeper insight that also later Chagim, festivals, and Ta'aniot, which are at the same time in the Jewish calendar, from much later source, from much later generations, they fit very well the overall structure of these Chagim. If Pesach is the beginning of the Jewish nation historically, and Shavuot physically, and Shavuot is the beginning of the nation at Har Sinai, spiritually, religiously, so beforehand, before Pesach, we have 30 days earlier, in a much later generation, Purim, we have 30 days earlier, the time when the Jewish nation survived in the diaspora, the anti-Semitic plans of Haman. It's true, it is much later, but Chazal made a connection. At the beginning of Masechet Pesachim, it says, 30 days before the Chag, you should start learning the Chag. And Rashi points out, there is a beginning of Kedushat HaChag 30 days earlier. How come? It's only preparation. 30 days before Pesach is Purim. And at the end of Masechet Megillah, it says 30 days, the same Braita, before the Chag, we should start learning. What is 30 days after Purim? It's Pesach. So the Masechtot connected with the 30 days, and we have exactly 30 days between Purim and Pesach. Purim is the survival of the Jewish nation in the diaspora, despite all the tzarot and all the attacks from Haman and others. And further 30 days earlier is Tu B'Shvat. The season of the spring begins, and Eretz Yisrael starts to give the fruits. Before we can organize the Jewish people in the diaspora, Eretz Yisrael gets ready, as it says in the Nevuat Yechezkel, to accept the Jewish people coming home to the land. That's not only before Pesach and Shavuot that the dates are connected by the 30 days. Afterwards, we have the 40 days, Shavuot, that Moshe was at Har Sinai. He came down and he saw the Jewish people with the Egel HaZahav, golden calf, and he broke the Luchot on Yud Zayin Tammuz. 40 days it took him to change the Jewish people, and he went back to the Har Sinai for another 40 days, from Rosh Chodesh Elul till Yom Kippur. So you see there is a flow of ideas before and after Shavuot, which closes almost the entire year. Pesach and Shavuot, if so, are the time when we left the Galut and we came to Eretz Yisrael. Interestingly enough, the Mishnah in Masechet Pesachim picks this idea and focuses on this idea to tell us that indeed on Pesach, what we tell in the Haggadah is Matchil Begnut Umesayem Beshevach. That is the structure how we tell the Haggadah. He begins with the account of Israel's shame, of slavery in Egypt, and he concludes with Israel's glory with the Geula. And what is the example for that? V'doresh me'arami oved avi ad she'yigmor kol ha'parasha kula. He explains the text of Arami Oved Avi ad she'yigmor kol ha'parasha kula. Doresh could be an expression of interpretation, of explanation, but Doresh could also be a request. He tries to follow it. Doresh Drishat Shalom. We try to accomplish something. So if Pesach, it is very surprising that for Pesach we have so many interesting parshiot in Torah to tell the story in Egypt, the exit from Egypt, Sefer Shmot, and many other, a lot of accounts to tell the story. Why do we have to take for Pesach something from Shavuot? That's exactly what we see from the inside in the Jewish calendars. Pesach is not completed if we don't come to Shavuot. And indeed, the Mishnah in Masechet Shavuot uses the same wording like the Mishnah in Pesachim and says, "V'koreh me'arami oved avi ad shehu gomer kol ha'parasha." He reads Parashat Bikurim. Now that's a recital. It's a reading, a declaration. Now I complete what I planned in Pesach. Pesach we left and hoped to get to close this process. Shavuot, we got to the point, we bring the Bikurim, the first fruits, and we celebrate the closing of Yetziat Mitzrayim by bringing the fruits to Eretz Yisrael. That's what we can see from this insight. Interestingly enough, that in the time of the Gemara, Mishnah Gemara, Lag BaOmer was exactly this critical time period between Eretz Yisrael and Geula, actually the opposite of the students of Rabbi Akiva at the time of the Churban, beginning of the exile. And in our generation, in the previous generation, these were the three dates which were exactly in the time between Pesach and Shavuot. Yom HaShoah, to remember the terrible Holocaust, Yom Ha'atzmaut, the beginning of the State of Israel, a week later, and Yom Yerushalayim just before Shavuot, celebrating Yom Yerushalayim, at the time that we got back to Yerushalayim. So that's just as a additional historical perspective, how these dates fit exactly the idea of biblical Shavuot, Pesach and Shavuot. I would like now, following this overview on the Chagim, focus on the overview of the entire Haggadah. And of course, that is quite a challenge. It's a long text, but the Haggadah has an order, has a structure. It's called seder, seder shel Pesach. And very often we start reading and one explanation and we go in depth, but we lose the overview and we can't see the wood for the trees because there are so many interesting midrashim and psukim. What I would like to show you now is that the Mishnah is actually the most important source for the development of the Haggadah. There are sources from the Tanakh, from the Bible, which were incorporated in the Mishnah. These sources go back as Parshat Bikurim, the account of the Esor Makot, of Arba'at Abanim, the 4 sons, Kriyat Halel, before the Mishnah by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was created, was edited. These texts were around, and these were the original Haggadah. That's the way to tell the story. Afterwards, at the time of the Mishnah, in parallel with the Tosefta, Midrashei Halacha, and other sources of the Mishnah, in the Yerushalmi, some differences, the Mishnah was the main establishment. How do we want to celebrate Haggadah in future generations? The Mishnah talks both about the time of the Beit HaMikdash, when the Korban was brought, and both afterwards. Uvamikdash hayu meviim lefanav gufo shel Pesach. But the Mishnah prepares already how do we celebrate the Haggadah after the Beit HaMikdash. So the Mishnah is really successful to bring all these different sources from the past together and to prepare them for the future generation. I trust learning the Haggadah is not only fascinating and interesting for the seder, it's actually an outstanding case study to see how all the sources were summarized in the Mishnah by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi and prepared for many, many generations later to come to make it a meaningful Chag even after the time of the Mikdash. And we see that, of course, in the Gemara, Yerushalmi and Babli, in the Midrashim, in the many, many later development on the Gemara, which is the formation of the Haggadah Shel Pesach. Therefore, I think reviewing the Haggadah by the Mishnah is an excellent start. There are 10 Mishnayot. And we can see in the Mishnah a beautiful structure of the Seder, which is outlined very, very clearly. In my Haggadah, which I prepared, you get such an accordion, which summarizes the entire Haggadah. Here is the Mishnah, and it opens afterwards that you can see the entire text of the Haggadah. That's, of course, not for this presentation, but it's quite, I think, interesting to see the entire structure. As you can see here on the slide, the entire Haggadah, we can follow the sources in the Mishnah, which are from the Bible, which are typical additions from the Mishnah, and how was the Mishnah later on explained in the Midrash in order to create our Haggadah. So that is really a fascinating example. What I want to show on this slide are the two sources from the Mishnah, which are not only quoted a pasuk here or there, they are actually the main part of the Haggadah. And the Mishnah says, after we make Kiddush, and after the son asks a few questions, the father starts to explain him one text. And it is the text of Parshat Bikurim. As we just explained before, the first text, which is explained in much detail, the Midrash, the Haggadah, the Mishnah says, Matchil b'gnut u'mesayem b'shevach. We start with the shame of the story of the Jewish people in Egypt, the slavery, the exit, and afterwards we conclude that they came to Eretz Israel with the end. Interesting that the Mishnah deals primarily with the Haggadah at the end, after the Churban. There are no details about the Korban. Korban Pesach is described in the Mishnayot beforehand in Masechet Pesachim. This Perek in Pesachim talks about the time after the Churban, primarily. How is the seder structured? But at the very, very end, we have a Mishnah which says, HaPesach HaChatzot Metameh et hayadayim, and it reflects very, very much the time of the Mikdash. The Mishnah wants to show us, if you tell the story, you keep telling the story and you keep the memory alive, you remember. By remembering, as the English etymology says, you connect as a member to the past if you remember, and you create the future. The last Mishnah talks about the future, when the Mikdash will be rebuilt. So the entire Mishnah is structured in a way of Matchil Begnut u'Mesayem B'Shevach. I would like now to focus soon on Parshat Bikurim, to say a few words. One of the shiurim later on will be, and you will find it online, will be the Hallel. And what we know about the Hallel is that if there is a Seudah in the middle, the festival, the meal in the middle, beforehand we say Birkat Geula, we celebrate the liberation from Egypt, Geula, Ga'al Israel. After the meal, we say Birkat HaMazon, and we continue with the Hallel. It's very interesting that the second source, which the Mishnah picked up from the Bible to create the Haggadah, is Hallel, Hallel HaMitzri. And we will have a shiur on that, but in the context of the shiur today, I will say later on a few words. So here we have actually the structure of the entire Perek in Arvei Pesachim, which follows very, very much the idea of Matchil Begnut u'Mesayem B'Shevach. Let's now take a look at Parshat Bikurim. And as we said before, when we looked at the Jewish calendar, Parshat Bikurim is the text, the most typical text for Shavuot. When we harvest the fruits, the first fruits in Eretz Yisrael, and bring them to Mikdash. I would like to show that in this parasha, only 6 psukim are quoted in the Haggadah, but let's take a look on the biblical source. It says, "V'haya ki tavo el haaretz asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach nachala v'yirishta v'yashavta ba." Once you will come to the land, you will come there, ki tavo. And it says, "Velakachta mirashit kol pri ha'adama asher tavi me'artzecha uvata el hakohen." There is a very interesting play with the words of lahavi. You come in the land, you bring from your fields, and you go to the Mikdash. These are 3 different movements, hard to translate that to another language. But in Hebrew, it's actually the same idea. Coming to the land or living in the land brings me to the next step, that I bring from the field the fruits and bring them to the Kohen in Yerushalayim. And what does the farmer say when he comes to the Mikdash? Higadati hayom laHashem Elokecha kivati el haaretz asher nishba Hashem laavotenu latet lanu. He says, I declare today that I came to the land which God gave me, which God gave to our promised our fathers to give them, and here I am. That's a very interesting statement. It sounds that there is nothing behind it, nothing into it, because he comes from his field to the Mikdash, and he can do that every year for generations, for many, many years. What is he telling us? He didn't come now. It might be his grandparents came many, many years ago, generations beforehand. But what actually is happening here is, Higadati here means I demonstrate it. I show by bringing the fruits, the first harvest from the land, I'm here. We live here. We have our roots here, and we can continue to live here. It's an ongoing repetition. It's the same word like Hagaddah, v'higadat levincha, but here he says, you should tell the story, And now he is telling the story. He comes to the land and closes without many words. Just by coming to the Mikdash with the fruits from his land, he says, yes, we have arrived here, and here we are, and here we stay. Afterwards, he leaves his fruits in front of the Kohen. And if at the beginning it said, Ve'amarta elav, you should tell the Kohen, now there is a second reflection. Ve'anita ve'amarta lifnei Hashem Elokecha. Now you continue to tell your story. Your story begins not now that you came from your field with your fruits. The story has a much, much longer background, historical background. Arami Oved Avi, and we were in Egypt, and we were in slavery, and we were liberated from there, and God gave us this land. I will not read all the psukim, and here I am to bring the fruits, and we are happy with all the good things that God gave us. Very interesting that in this parasha we have 6 times the word tavo, tavi, uvata, vati, vayevienu, heveti. You bring because you were brought to Eretz Israel. It's a beautiful connection and harmony of these 6 words. Furthermore, the expression naton, you gave, is also repeated very often, 7 times. God gave us this land, and we bring the fruits which God gave us, and we are happy to declare we came in the land which God gave us. But in the middle it says in Pasuk Vav, Vayareu otanu hamitzrim, vaya'anunu, vayitnu aleinu avodah kasha. You gave us a lot of good things, but when we were in the exile, when we were in the diaspora, there was a lot of hatred in Egypt, and they gave us something else, slavery. It doesn't say vayarvidu otanu, they put us to slaves. No, they gave us slavery in order to repeat the idea of the bad things we got in Egypt and of the good things we get when we are in Eretz Israel. The last 3 times in the parasha again describes that God gave us the land. Vayivien el hamakom hazeh vayiten lanu et haaretz. Pri ha'adama asher natata li Hashem. V'samachta b'chol hatov asher natan lacha Hashem Elokecha. Whatever you gave is good. 3 times at the beginning and 3 times at the end. We are surrounded and we are supported by all the good things you gave us. Eretz Israel and the fruits in Eretz Israel is an answer to the bad things that were given to us in Egypt, slavery. So that's a very, very beautiful comment in the parasha, and that is exactly what closes the exit of Egypt. It's for that reason that the Haggadah picked Parashat Bikurim to tell the story, because there is a closing. There is really a happy end. There is a Mesayem B'Shevach. Interesting that in the Haggadah text, it is very, very obvious that it's not only the exit of Egypt, which is the focus, it is the exit of Egypt till we came to Eretz Israel. As we see in the song, Kama Ma'alot Tovot Lamakom Aleinu. 15 times we say Dayenu, and it starts in Mimitzrayim. From Egypt, we were Makat Bchorot, and we left Egypt, and we were in the desert for 40 years, and we had man, and we got the Shabbat, Har Sinai, we came to Eretz Israel, and we have the Beit HaBchira in Eretz Israel, the Mikdash. These 15 lines are repeated one more time. Alachat kama v'chama tova ukfula u'mechupelet lamakom aleinu. And the same topics are repeated again in 15 lines. These ma'alot, these steps that we came closer to Eretz Israel 15 times, remind us very much about the Mikdash, where there were 15 ma'alot, 15 steps, K'neget 15 shirei ha'ma'alot, where we were singing where we came from and where we are now. So that is a very interesting insight, that the exodus from Egypt is not only leaving Egypt, but also entering Eretz Israel, as reflected, as we saw in the calendar, as reflected, as we saw as the main text for the Haggadah in the Mishnah, and in this song, which is obviously from a much later time. I would like, and the end point, of course, is the Bikurim that we bring Shavuot to the Beit HaMikdash. I would like now to make only one little comment on the Hallel. There are many ways to write history. There are many perspectives to document history. And of course, it's a very subjective view which can be presented in historical documentation. In Sefer Shmot, we talk about what happened when we left Egypt. However, the Haggadah wants us to read the Hallel because the Hallel has another viewpoint, has another perspective. In the Hallel, as we will see in a later shiur, the Hallel describes Betzet Yisrael miMitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am lo'ez, Hayta Yehuda lekodsho, Yisrael mamshelotav. When we left Egypt, the Jewish people, with His holiness, was protected by Hashem, and a big miracle happened. Hayam ra'a vayanos, hayarden yisov la'achor. The sea saw it. Yam is Yam Suf, leaving Egypt, but it's also the Yarden. Yarden entering Eretz Yisrael is the next step, is the closing, the next station in order to bring us to the ultimate goal of Yetziat Mitzrayim, to Eretz Yisrael. So Sefer Tehillim says the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim is only completed if we talk about Hayam Ra'a Vayanos. And when we describe that till Pasuk Dalet, the next Pasuk describes, it's not history, what we are describing here. It's actually, we are there. We see what is happening there, and we are not telling a story what happened historically a few hundred, a few thousand years ago. We are actually there. We live history. And we are now at the moment of the exodus of Egypt. We say, Malach hayam kitanos, hayarden tisov la'achor. So we talk the story, we experience the story in this mizmor because we think about the story not only as a historical event, it is a relevant story and we are part of it. And what I wanted to emphasize from this pasuk is that the exodus from Egypt, as we see here, has another station which closes when we cross the Yarden. And that is the reason that the two biblical sources in the Mishnah and in the Haggadah are focusing very, very much to connect Pesach to Shavuot, because these two Chagim are deeply connected. They are the two sides of the same coin. What I try to show you in this first introductory lecture is an overview of the Jewish calendar, which is very, very interesting, with a lot of interesting insights for every Chag. I try to emphasize just the connection between Pesach and Shavuot, and to show their deep connection. And we took a look at the structure of the Mishnah and the two typical sources, the two major sources in the Mishnah from the Bible, Parshat Bikurim and Hallel. And we took a short look at Parshat Bikurim and a short comment on the Hallel, the first Betzet Yisrael miMitzrayim, in order to understand the structure of the Haggadah Shel Pesach. I hope that was interesting and helpful, and looking forward to present the next step of these shiurim.